Part 1. Born to Lead, Early Life and World War I, 1,000 words. The story of Terry Delamy Allen begins on April 1, 1888, at Fort Douglas in the Utah Territory, deep in the rugged landscape of the American West. He was born into a family for whom military service was not just a career, it was a way of life, a bloodline passed down through generations. His father, Colonel Samuel Allen, had spent decades in uniform, moving from post to post across the frontier, instilling in his children the discipline, courage, and stubbornness of the old army. But the military tradition in Allen's family ran even deeper. His maternal grandfather, Captain Carlos Alvarez de la Mesa, had fought for the Union at Gettysburg, commanding Company C of the 39th New York Volunteer Infantry. Known as the Garibaldi Guard, it was a unit largely composed of Italian immigrants who had come to America seeking freedom and had found themselves fighting to preserve it. On July 2, 1863, Captain de la Mesa was wounded in the savage fighting around the peach orchard in the wheat field, two of the bloodiest zones on the battlefield. Despite his injuries, he survived and continued to serve until the war's end. The courage, tenacity, and love of service exhibited by these men were a legacy that coursed through young Terry's veins. Growing up on military posts across the American frontier, Allen learned to ride horses before he could read properly and to shoot before mastering arithmetic. The world he grew up in was one where mounted soldiers still practiced cavalry charges and imagined wars won by speed, courage, and the sharp edge of a saber. Discipline, stamina, and boldness were the currency of survival, and Terry Allen absorbed these lessons naturally. He was restless, energetic, and always ready for action, a boy who would rather be running across a field with a rifle than sitting quietly at a desk. In 1907, Terry received what every military family dreams of, an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Here was a chance to follow in his father's footsteps and continue the family legacy. Yet, the academy was built for men who could memorize textbooks, sit silently through endless lectures, and follow every rule to the letter. Terry Allen was none of these. He hated the rigid discipline, despised the endless mathematics, and chafed under the strict hierarchy. His restless energy earned him the nickname Tear Around the Mess Hall Allen, a playful jab at his inability to sit still. He struggled with academics, particularly mathematics and gunnery, and he stuttered in class, earning demerits for minor infractions. The academy that was supposed to forge him into an officer seemed to break him instead. In 1911, after repeated failures, Terry Allen was dismissed from West Point. Most young men would have given up, crushed by the shame of failure. But Allen was not most men. Determined to continue his military path, he enrolled at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., where he applied himself to his studies with the same intensity he would later apply to combat. By 1912, he earned a Bachelor of Arts degree and, on November 30, 1912, received his commission as a second lieutenant in the cavalry. He had made it into the Army, not through the traditional front door of West Point, but through sheer persistence, determination, and refusal to accept failure. This pattern, finding another way when the system blocked him, would define Allen's entire career. Allen's early service took him to the Mexican border in 1913, where he demonstrated both boldness and unconventional thinking. On one occasion, Lieutenant Allen led just 6 soldiers against 30 Mexican cattle rustlers who had crossed into American territory. Military doctrine dictated that he wait for reinforcements, but Allen saw a clear opportunity and acted. The attack was swift and decisive. All 30 rustlers were either captured or killed. This was the hallmark of Terry Allen, a man who assessed the situation, decided on action, and executed it with fearless precision, regardless of conventional rules. When the First World War erupted in Europe, Allen was eager to join the fight. Like many young officers, he feared that the war would end before he could prove himself. When he finally shipped out to France in 1918, his first assignment was far from glorious. He was placed in charge of the 315th Ammunition Train, attached to the 90th Infantry Division, hauling artillery shells to the front lines. It was dangerous, grueling, and monotonous work, but Allen was there, at the front, seeing firsthand the realities of modern industrial warfare. Eventually, he was given command of the 3rd Battalion of the 358th Infantry Regiment, part of the 90th Division, which allowed him to step into the combat leadership role he had long sought. It was in the mud and blood of the Western Front that Allen first demonstrated his tactical genius. During the St. Mihiel offensive and later in the Mesa Allen offensive, he developed his signature innovation, night attacks. Traditional military doctrine taught commanders to defend at night and launch attacks during the day when visibility allowed units to coordinate effectively. Daylight attacks, however, produced horrific casualty rates. Machine guns cut down advancing infantry with ease, artillery observers adjusted fire with deadly precision, and defenders had clear lines of sight. Allen observed that attacking at night could reduce casualties. Darkness would mask movements, confuse the enemy, and allow small, well-coordinated units to strike with maximum effect. He meticulously trained his men in reconnaissance, signaling, and coordination for night operations, keeping plans simple and effective. On October 24, 1918, during a night attack, Allen was shot in the face by machine gun fire. Tagged for evacuation, he persuaded the doctors to return him to duty, staying with his men despite his injuries. This act of courage cemented his reputation. He would not abandon his soldiers, no matter the danger. For his leadership and valor, he was awarded the Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts. Soldiers who fought under him saw a commander who led by example, sharing their risks and inspiring their courage. The message was clear: we are in this together. Follow me. The lessons Allen learned in World War I, boldness, adaptability, and leadership from the front, would follow him throughout his career. He understood that courage alone was not enough. Training, innovation, and relentless preparation were essential. His experiences also taught him the value of trusting soldiers, keeping plans simple, and exploiting weaknesses in enemy defenses. These principles, first tested in the mud of France, would later define his command of 2 of the most distinguished American divisions of World War II. By the time the guns fell silent in 1918, Terry Allen had earned a reputation as a brave, capable, and unconventional leader. But peace brought new challenges. The interwar U.S. Army was tiny, promotion slow, and ambition stifled. Many officers drifted into obscurity, but Allen refused to waste his potential. His early life, marked by privilege, training, failure, and determination, had forged a man capable of extraordinary leadership, a man who would one day terrify German soldiers in the forests of Belgium, earning the nickname Terrible Terry. Part 2. Forging the Big Red One, North Africa and Sicily, 1,000 words. The guns of World War I had fallen silent, but for Terry Allen, the fight was far from over. The years between the wars were brutal for ambitious officers. The U.S. Army had shrunk dramatically, from over 4 million men in 1918 to barely 130,000 by the mid-1920s, and promotions were scarce. Officers who had commanded battalions in combat suddenly found themselves stuck as captains for a decade or more. Frustration drove some to resign or drown in drink. Others, like Allen, chose preparation over despair. Allen refused to stagnate. He trained relentlessly, studied military history, and tested himself in ways few would dare. In 1920, he entered a 300-mile horseback race across central Texas, a grueling trial pitting frontier cavalrymen against local cowboys. The ride tested endurance, skill, and nerves. Allen completed the journey in 101 hours and 56 minutes, winning the contest and proving that he had the stamina of the old cavalry, the grit to endure any hardship, and the mental toughness to thrive under pressure. That same year, he earned a bronze medal in polo at the 1920 Summer Olympics in Antwerp, Belgium, representing the U.S. Army equestrian team. His prowess on horseback and in the field marked him as a true cavalryman of the old school, but Allen also understood that the future of warfare was changing. Horses would matter less. Mobility, firepower, and coordinated combined arms operations would dominate the next conflict. Allen adapted accordingly. As the 1930s unfolded, Allen continued preparing. He trained his troops relentlessly, experimented with new tactics, and observed the evolving methods of foreign armies. By the time World War II loomed on the horizon, Allen was ready. On October 1, 1940, General George C. Marshall, newly appointed Chief of Staff of the Army, recognized his talent. Despite opposition from others who saw Allen as rough-edged and unconventional, Marshall promoted him directly from lieutenant colonel to brigadier general, skipping the rank of colonel entirely. Marshall saw what mattered most. Allen could lead men in combat. Everything else, his drinking habits, his disdain for ceremonial discipline, was secondary. In May 1942, Allen received command of the First Infantry Division, the oldest and proudest division in the United States Army, famously known as the Big Red One. This assignment would define the first phase of his World War II career. Allen's approach to leadership was simple but unorthodox. He led from the front, trained his soldiers relentlessly, and refused to tolerate timidity in combat. Discipline mattered, but victory mattered more. His men learned that fear was a tool to master, not a weakness to hide. On November 8, 1942, the Big Red One landed at Ardennes, Algeria, as part of Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. The operation was perilous. Landing craft splashed onto beaches under fire, and artillery and small arms fire claimed the lives of men before they could even reach the shore. The division suffered 418 casualties in the initial landing, including 94 killed in action, yet it secured its objectives. Allen's leadership kept the men moving forward, instilling confidence and courage even as the chaos of amphibious landings unfolded around them. The real trial came in Tunisia. The German army, seasoned and experienced in desert warfare, launched a massive counteroffensive at Kasserine Pass in February 1943. Unprepared American units faltered. Equipment was captured or destroyed, battalions broke, and confusion spread through the ranks. The Allies faced disaster. But Allen, alongside General Paul Robinette, quickly assessed the situation and organized a decisive counterattack at Jebel al-Hamra on February 21. He positioned artillery, directed infantry, and personally oversaw operations that stabilized the line. His troops captured 400 prisoners and contained the German advance, demonstrating that leadership could compensate for inexperience and that American forces, when properly led, could stand toe-to-toe with veteran German units. Then came El Ghetta, March 1943, a battle that would cement Allen's reputation. The Germans attacked with tanks, attempting to pierce the American lines and roll up the front. For 21 grueling days, Allen's division withstood relentless armored assaults. Heat soared to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, water was scarce, and every defensive line was repeatedly probed. On March 23, German tanks broke through forward positions and threatened Allen's headquarters. Staff officers suggested a tactical withdrawal, logical, safe, professional. Allen's response became legendary: "I will like hell pull out, and I will shoot the first bastard who does." The headquarters remained in place, sending a clear message: retreat was not an option. Allen's calm under fire steadied both staff and troops. American artillery and tank destroyers engaged the German armor at point-blank range, repelling the advance. For the first time, German forces had met an American commander who refused to panic, refused to retreat, and demanded victory at any cost. After El Ghetta, the First Infantry Division pressed forward, eventually participating in the final push on Tunis in May 1943. The division took heavy casualties, but achieved every assigned objective. 4 days after Tunis fell, nearly 250,000 Axis troops surrendered, marking the end of the North Africa campaign. Allen had demonstrated that American soldiers, properly led, could overcome the most battle-hardened enemy in the world. His men, some raw and inexperienced before the campaign, had become elite troops through relentless training, courage, and leadership. The next challenge awaited in Sicily. On July 10, 1943, the Big Red One landed at Gela during Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. The beach was exposed, German and Italian forces occupied commanding hills, and counterattacks were inevitable. True to form, Allen led his men under fire, organizing defenses and guiding assaults with his usual calm decisiveness. The following day, German tanks from the Hermann Göring Panzer Division counterattacked, threatening to split the beachhead. Allen's infantry, reinforced by naval gunfire, held the line. Omar Bradley later wrote that he doubted any other American division could have repelled the German armored assault. Allen's men had done it. The beachhead was secure. Sicily would fall, but the cost was heavy, and the Big Red One's mettle had been tested. The battle for Troina, a fortified mountain town, pushed Allen's soldiers to their limits. From July 31 to August 6, 1943, his division fought building by building, street by street, clearing German defenders entrenched in nearly every structure. The Germans launched 24 counterattacks over 6 days, all repelled by Allen's men, trained to fight relentlessly and follow his lead. By the end, Troina had fallen, the road to Messina was open, but the division was exhausted. These were men transformed by Allen's leadership, from green troops to a battle-hardened elite, capable of matching any experienced unit the Germans could field. Yet even at the peak of his success, Allen faced setbacks. On August 7, 1943, just 2 days before he appeared on the cover of Time magazine, Omar Bradley relieved him from command of the First Infantry Division. Official reasons cited discipline concerns. His men, confident and somewhat arrogant, needed tighter control. In truth, some historians believe Eisenhower and Patton had pre-planned the relief, intending Allen only for the toughest early battles. Part 3. The Timberwolves, Training for Darkness, 1,000 Words. By October 1943, Terry Allen was back in command, but this time, of a division that was the exact opposite of the Big Red One. The 104th Infantry Division, known as the Timberwolves, was composed almost entirely of green recruits, farm boys and factory workers from the western states, many barely out of their teens. They had never been in combat, most had never left home, and the German intelligence officers who monitored American troop movements expected them to break under fire. They believed they were sending fresh prey into the European forests. They could not have been more wrong. Allen did not flinch at the challenge. He saw potential where others saw inexperience. He understood that raw recruits, properly trained and led, could be transformed into a weapon more dangerous than veteran soldiers who had grown complacent. But potential was meaningless without preparation. Allen immediately set out to create the most thoroughly trained division in the United States Army, a unit that would fight differently than any other American force. The key, he decided, was night combat. Night operations had been Allen's innovation since World War I. He understood that darkness could be a force multiplier. It created confusion for defenders, concealed movement, and allowed the attacker to strike first. Other divisions avoided it, fearing friendly fire and disorganization. Allen saw opportunity. He began drilling his men in silent movement, night navigation, and coordinated attacks under darkness. Every soldier learned to use a compass, read terrain features, and memorize routes. They trained to move without speaking, relying on hand signals, whistles, and prearranged codes. Every company, platoon, and battalion drilled relentlessly until night became their ally, not their enemy. The training schedule was brutal. Where standard Army units practiced 10 to 12 hours of tactical instruction per week, Allen's men endured 30 to 35 hours weekly, sometimes 6 hours a day in addition to normal military duties. The Oregon forests became a crucible. Soldiers marched through mud and rain in the dead of night, assaulted mock enemy positions under simulated artillery fire, and practiced with live ammunition to recreate the terror of actual combat. Exhaustion was constant. Injuries were common. Some officers grumbled that Allen was pushing too hard. His men, however, thrived. They learned that fear could be managed, that darkness could be turned into a weapon, and that a soldier's confidence was built through preparation, not luck. Allen insisted on simplicity in night operations. Complex plans failed in darkness. Orders were clear, objectives concise, and contingencies minimal. Soldiers knew exactly what to do, even if chaos erupted around them. He drilled them repeatedly in attacks on fortified positions, river crossings, and enemy patrols. The division became a finely tuned machine, silent, swift, and deadly after sundown. By the summer of 1944, the 104th Infantry Division was ready for deployment. These green recruits, once raw and inexperienced, had become veteran-quality soldiers trained to dominate the night. On October 23, 1944, the Timberwolves crossed into Belgium near the German border. The forests were dark, dense, and cold. German soldiers, veterans of campaigns across Europe, had taken up defensive positions, confident that they would face an inexperienced American unit. Reports from intelligence indicated green troops, farm boys and factory workers untested in battle. It was supposed to be an easy victory. But Allen had other plans. At 2,300 hours, under the cover of night, his division moved silently into position. Companies navigated by compass and memory of terrain scouted during daylight. They struck from unexpected directions, eliminating sentries before alarms could be raised. German positions that seemed secure were overrun before defenders even realized what was happening. Forward observers attempted to call for artillery support, but in darkness, targets were difficult to identify, and every German machine gun fired blindly into the black. By the time reinforcements arrived, the Americans had already moved to the next objective, striking again with grenades, rifles, and sheer determination. By dawn, the results were clear. Entire German platoons had been neutralized. Positions that had seemed impenetrable during daylight became death traps under the Timberwolves' assault. German officers sent urgent reports up the chain. This was no ordinary American division. These soldiers fought like veterans, trained and confident, attacking at night when other units would have rested. The division owned the darkness. The forest had become a weapon, wielded with precision by a general who understood fear, discipline, and innovation. The weeks that followed cemented the Timberwolves' reputation. On November 2, 1944, the 104th crossed the Mark River in another night operation, catching German defenders completely by surprise. They attacked fortified positions in the Ardennes sector that had resisted other Allied assaults for weeks. Allen's tactics, simple, precise, relentless, broke enemy lines repeatedly. Defenders, confused and terrified, could not mount effective resistance. Entire German units that expected an easy victory found themselves scattered, demoralized, and vulnerable. The Timberwolves' dominance in darkness was noticed quickly by both Allied and enemy forces. German intelligence reports referred to the division as elite troops specializing in night operations. Axis broadcasts, monitored by Allied intelligence, included complaints about American night fighting, calling it unfair. In Allen's eyes, that was high praise. If the enemy considered your tactics unfair, it meant you were doing something right. He had trained his men not just to survive but to thrive in conditions that frightened the unprepared. This success was not simply the result of raw courage. It was the culmination of Allen's philosophy, relentless preparation, personal leadership, and tactical innovation. He had taken untested young men and transformed them into soldiers who could move, fight, and strike like veterans from the first day of battle. The 104th was Allen's second division of distinction, proving that his methods were not a fluke. The lessons learned in North Africa and Sicily with the First Infantry Division, courage under fire, leading from the front, and turning fear into an advantage, had been applied again with remarkable success. The Timberwolves were a living testament to Allen's leadership. By the end of October, the German soldiers who survived encounters with the Timberwolves were spreading warnings. Reports reached units across the front. The Americans were dangerous, unpredictable, and capable of fighting through the night. And at the center of it all was terrible Terry Allen, the same general who had led the Big Red One through North Africa and Sicily, the man the enemy had hoped would be tamed by bureaucratic discipline, but who instead continued to prove his brilliance on the battlefield. The forests of Belgium were no longer safe for the Wehrmacht, and the Timberwolves were just getting started. Part 4. The Timberwolves in Combat, Belgium and the Battle of the Bulge, 1,000 words. By December 1944, the Timberwolves had earned a reputation that preceded them. Terry Allen's 104th Infantry Division had turned inexperienced men into soldiers who could fight with precision and ferocity in the darkness. German commanders, who once expected easy victories against green American recruits, now feared them. Reports circulated in Wehrmacht headquarters. This division struck at night, moved silently, and could not be stopped by conventional means. The enemy whispers called Allen's soldiers ghosts, and the division's nickname, the Timberwolves, became synonymous with unrelenting night attacks. The true test came during what would become one of the most famous battles of World War II, the Battle of the Bulge. On December 16, 1944, the Germans launched their massive winter offensive, seeking to split the Allied forces in the Ardennes forest and capture the Belgian port of Antwerp. The attack was sudden and brutal, relying on surprise, speed, and the freezing winter weather to overwhelm the Allies. Many American units, including seasoned veterans, found themselves forced into hasty defensive positions. Panic and confusion threatened to undo the fragile Allied line. Allen's Timberwolves were among the units assigned to hold critical positions in the Ardennes. The 104th had never faced such a concentrated enemy offensive, yet Allen's men were ready. He personally oversaw defensive preparations, using his knowledge of terrain, night operations, and combat psychology to maximize the effectiveness of his division. Soldiers dug in, reinforced positions, and set up ambush points, but Allen did not simply rely on static defenses. He prepared counterattacks designed to hit the Germans where they were most vulnerable, in the dark, at night, and under unexpected pressure. As the German advance began, the Timberwolves faced continuous artillery barrages, armored assaults, and infantry attacks. Allen's men held firm, using terrain to their advantage, camouflage, and calculated movement to repel enemy probes. Where other units might have retreated in fear or confusion, Allen's leadership inspired confidence. His personal presence at forward positions reminded soldiers that their commander was willing to share the danger he asked them to face. This leadership, visible, immediate, and fearless, proved invaluable in holding the line. Night after night, the 104th launched coordinated counterattacks, striking German positions unexpectedly. They moved silently through snow-covered forests, using prearranged signals, and struck at German strongpoints before vanishing into the darkness. Forward units, supported by artillery and limited armored elements, disrupted enemy supply lines, captured prisoners, and held key crossroads. The German advance slowed. Confusion and fear spread among the attackers, who had assumed they would encounter disorganized, inexperienced Americans. Instead, they met a division that fought like seasoned veterans, trained for precisely this type of warfare. Allen's emphasis on continuous pressure and surprise allowed his division to absorb the initial shock of the offensive while striking back decisively. On December 22, 1944, the Timberwolves launched a night assault across the frozen Roer River. Their objective was a series of fortified German positions that had stalled other Allied divisions for days. Under Allen's command, companies moved silently, suppressed enemy positions, and seized control before daylight. The operation inflicted heavy casualties on the Germans and forced them to divert troops to defend against a threat they could not predict. By February 1945, the Ardennes offensive had been halted, and the Timberwolves transitioned from defense to offensive operations. Allen understood the importance of maintaining momentum. He pushed his men forward into the heart of Germany, crossing rivers under fire, assaulting fortified towns, and capturing key objectives with minimal delay. The division advanced hundreds of miles in a matter of weeks, striking at the German heartland with precision and relentless determination. The 104th Infantry Division's accomplishments during this period were staggering. The soldiers, who had once been inexperienced civilians, were now battle-hardened veterans. Entire towns were liberated, German resistance was broken, and civilians came to see the Americans as liberators. Allen's division even participated in the liberation of the Nordhausen concentration camp in April 1945, witnessing the horrors of the Nazi regime firsthand. The soldiers were confronted with piles of corpses, malnourished survivors, and evidence of systematic atrocities. Allen insisted on documenting everything, ensuring that the world would see what had been done, and forcing nearby civilians to witness the consequences of their government's actions. Despite the grueling months of combat, Terry Allen's men maintained morale and discipline. His leadership style, direct, fearless, and deeply committed to his soldiers, kept the division cohesive. Men knew that Allen would never ask them to do anything he was not willing to do himself. He walked among his troops under fire, checked positions personally, and provided immediate guidance and encouragement. This personal leadership inspired loyalty and courage, ensuring that even the youngest and greenest soldiers would fight with confidence. As the division pushed into central Germany, the psychological impact on German troops became apparent. Stories spread of American soldiers who attacked at night and disappeared without warning. German officers who had survived North Africa and Sicily began to recognize the pattern. When the Timberwolves were operating, no position was safe, and the night belonged to the Americans. The fear and confusion caused by Allen's tactics forced German units to maintain high alert around the clock, spreading their forces thinner and reducing their combat effectiveness elsewhere. By the spring of 1945, the 104th had crossed the Rhine River and advanced deep into German territory, capturing Cologne and pressing toward the heart of the Reich. Every operation reflected Allen's philosophy of aggressive leadership, rigorous training, and innovative tactics. His division's success demonstrated that Green troops, properly prepared and inspired, could outperform seasoned veterans. The Timberwolves were no longer a division of farm boys and factory workers. They were one of the finest assault divisions in the European theater. The story of the 104th in Belgium and the Ardennes illustrates the essence of Terry Allen's leadership, preparation, innovation, personal courage, and relentless pressure. Through his training and example, Allen turned inexperience into skill, fear into confidence, and raw recruits into a force capable of defeating veteran enemy units. By the time the division crossed the Rhine, German soldiers no longer underestimated American forces. They feared them. And they knew that the general leading them, Terrible Terry Allen, would not stop until victory was achieved. Part 5: Victory, Liberation, and Legacy, 1,000 words. By March 1945, the 104th Infantry Division, Terry Allen's Timberwolves, had become a fearsome, well-oiled machine. Months of continuous combat, night operations, and relentless training had transformed Green American recruits into a division feared by German troops across Europe. Allen's emphasis on surprise, coordination, and decisive action had proved itself time and again. But the final stretch of the war would test the Timberwolves in ways no training exercise could simulate. On March 5, 1945, the division captured Cologne, one of Germany's great cities. Urban combat posed unique challenges. Streets, buildings, and cellars were turned into strongpoints by German defenders. Every corner could hide a machine gun or sniper. Allen's men had learned from earlier campaigns that planning, reconnaissance, and aggression were key. Companies moved in coordinated waves, using artillery, grenades, and flamethrowers to clear buildings room by room. By nightfall, Cologne was secured, and civilian casualties minimized thanks to Allen's insistence on careful coordination. From Cologne, the Timberwolves advanced deeper into Germany. Crossing the Rhine River in late March was a logistical and tactical feat under enemy fire. Engineers built bridges while infantry secured the flanks. Allen personally supervised these operations, understanding that hesitation could cost lives. The 104th pressed on, covering hundreds of miles in weeks, seizing towns and disrupting German defenses. The speed and precision of their advance left German commanders bewildered. The Timberwolves were everywhere at once, striking at night, vanishing before reinforcements could arrive, and leaving devastation in their wake. One of the most haunting moments for Allen and his men came on April 11, 1945, with the liberation of Nordhausen concentration camp, a subcamp of the Dora-Mittelbau complex. The soldiers had prepared for combat, but they were not prepared for what awaited them. Around 3,000 corpses lay scattered across the campgrounds. 750 prisoners were barely alive, skeletal, and diseased. These men had endured unimaginable suffering, forced to labor in underground factories building V-2 rockets while being systematically starved and beaten. Allen's men were sickened and outraged, but he remained calm and methodical. He ordered photographs, documentation, and the presence of nearby civilians to witness the aftermath, ensuring that the truth of Nazi atrocities would be undeniable. Following Nordhausen, the Timberwolves continued their march through Germany. They fought house-to-house battles, cleared fortified towns, and secured strategic infrastructure, including bridges, railroads, and supply depots. The fighting was brutal, and casualties were high, but the men had learned to rely on their training and each other. Allen's personal leadership remained critical. Soldiers knew their general led from the front, never asked them to do what he wouldn't do, and shared every danger. This personal courage inspired loyalty and kept morale high, even in the harshest conditions. The final major operation of the 104th came in late April, when Allen's division made contact with Soviet forces advancing from the east at Prech on the Iller River. This link-up symbolized the effective partitioning of Germany and the imminent collapse of the Third Reich. For Allen, it also marked a moment of reflection. His division had been in continuous combat for 200 days, facing veteran enemy forces, difficult terrain, and winter conditions, yet not a single major objective had failed. His leadership had turned inexperienced civilians into combat veterans capable of rivaling any division in the European theater. By May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, the war in Europe officially ended. The Timberwolves had captured towns, crossed rivers, fought through mountains, and liberated concentration camps. They had been instrumental in defeating German forces, earning a reputation for bravery, skill, and relentless aggression. German soldiers who survived encounters with Allen's division spread the word. The Americans who attacked at night were unstoppable, and their commander, Terrible Terry Allen, was a general to be feared. Terry Allen himself never sought fame, though he had earned it repeatedly. His approach to leadership, aggressive, innovative, and deeply personal, set him apart. He refused to compromise the effectiveness of his troops for appearances, regulations, or protocol. He drank, cursed, and defied convention, yet when it came to combat, his decisions were clear, precise, and effective. While many in the peacetime army found him difficult, during wartime, his methods produced results. After the war, Allen retired from the U.S. Army on August 31, 1946, with the rank of Major General. He had commanded 2 divisions through some of the hardest fighting in World War II, the First Infantry Division in North Africa and Sicily, and the 104th Infantry Division across Northwest Europe. Both divisions believed they were among the best in the Army, shaped by the same man who had taught them to fight like professionals, survive like veterans, and strike like predators in the night. Allen's personal legacy continued through his family. Tragically, on October 17, 1967, his son, Lieutenant Colonel Terry DeLamy Allen, Jr., was killed in Vietnam, commanding the 2nd Battalion of the 28th Infantry Regiment, part of his father's old 1st Infantry Division. Allen Jr.'s battalion walked into a prepared ambush, suffering heavy casualties, and he died leading from the front, just as his father had done decades earlier. The death of his son devastated Allen, who was already in declining health. Less than 2 years later, on September 12, 1969, Terry Allen passed away at El Paso, Texas, at the age of 81. He was buried next to his son at Fort Bliss National Cemetery, closing a chapter of military service that had spanned generations. Today, the United States Military Academy at West Point, which had dismissed him as a cadet in 1911, honors his legacy with the General Terry DeLamy Allen Award, presented to the cadet with the highest rating in military science. The failed student had become one of the most successful combat commanders in American history. His story reminds us that leadership, courage, and innovation can overcome conventional obstacles, skepticism, and even dismissal by authorities. The German soldiers who had waited in the Belgian forests in October 1940 for expecting inexperienced Americans faced something entirely different. They encountered a division trained for night combat, led by a general who refused to accept defeat, and they learned a lesson they would not forget. Terrible Terry Allen had returned, and the night, once a time of vulnerability, belonged to the Timberwolves. His tactical innovations, personal leadership, and refusal to compromise on effectiveness ensured that his name would echo in military history as a commander who transformed ordinary men into extraordinary soldiers. Terry Allen's life, from the frontier posts of Utah to the forests of Belgium, from Tunisia to Sicily, and across the heart of Germany, exemplified courage, innovation, and dedication to soldiers above all else. He proved that discipline and strict adherence to convention are not the only paths to victory. Leadership, vision, and a relentless will to succeed can reshape the course of battles, and sometimes the course of history itself.